There we go, babes. You did it. Can you hear me, Glenn?
I can, Jane. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm a technocrat and my phone is not an iPhone, so it adds complicated layers.
Glynis Horning, award-winning freelance writer and dear friend, I'd like to say. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation this morning. And yeah, before we got cut off the last call, you asked how I am. I'm well, thank you. And it's really lovely to see you. It feels almost like I spoke to you yesterday, but then it also feels like a lot of time has passed.
Well, it's a full 2 years since we passed. It's 4 years since my boy passed. And then that first year, I'd written the book and took the second one until the book was published. And then you had me on your show in September 2 years ago. I can't believe it.
I must say, Glenn, that was possibly, I think, the hardest conversation I've had. It stands out as one of my hardest conversations because I think the mom in me really feels the mom in you. And I can definitely feel a sense of lightness around you. And I think maybe it's the straight fringe in me sees the straight fringe in you.
Totally. We see each other. What can I say?
So, I mean, September is Suicide Awareness Month. And of course, I just had to have you on and catch up with you and see how you're doing. How are you doing?
You know, as I wrote in a piece earlier this year called Watermarked, 4 years on, the storms are less frequent, but when they do come, they're still very intense, I've got to say. I think, one never really moves past something like this, but you have to accommodate it and you live with it and you move and do what you can to get through life as lightly as you can and as cheerfully as you can. There are other people to consider. There's my husband who's not well, he's got Parkinson's, my youngest son who's finishing up at varsity, and you need to keep upbeat for them. He always says, I just want you to be happy. So you really got to do that, and you can do that. And I know that Spence would want me to do that. So one tries to do that, and you just move ahead. You just plod ahead and do what you can.
So here's the book, Waterboy, Making Sense of My Son's Suicide. Glenn, let's go back to Spence as a little boy. What was he like?
He was a wonderful child. He was beautiful blonde thatch of hair. As his brother was dark, he was blonde, and very upbeat and very cheerful. And he was a very easy boy, and he soared at everything from play school through to Manor Gardens Primary School, when he ended up with top math boy in the Horizon Maths Challenge and all this stuff. And then he grew up and he was fine at Glenwood High School. He did extremely well there. He flourished at things like maths. Yeah, he was a star pupil, and it was actually only afterwards when he went to varsity and he was doing mechanical engineering and he seemed fine there, but then the stress and the pressure seemed to mount. And I think he possibly had it for a few years before that, linked to things like his blood disorder, which he had, which is thalassemia minor, which was, we only found out later, inherited through my husband's side of the family, which means you're always a bit anemic. So you don't quite have the same ability to bounce back and to concentrate. And I think that came to a crunch in his final year of mechanical engineering, which is very tough anyway. And he had I suppose you call it a breakdown. I found him in tears on the floor one day, and yeah, and it went from there. We realized he had this big problem of depression. But depression, anxiety, stress is so big for so many people today, and it's not getting easier. And Jane, I don't know if you want to go into the nitty gritty, but again, with just in terms of even the suicide, and SADAG used to get pre-pandemic about 1,500 calls a day. They now get more than 3,000 calls a day. And we have something like 23 suicides a day, which is nearly one an hour, in the time we're chatting here today. And it's really difficult. And although the pandemic has now passed and things kind of look better, I think when you think about it, we've got so many other stresses, especially from our point of view in this country, or other countries too. Political volatility, the economic situation, load shedding, STADAG did that survey this year with University of Johannesburg and found that load shedding has resulted in about 60% of people feeling panic attacks and anxiety, and 40% having depression, and 1 in 10 have contemplated suicide. So this problem is very big.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Glenn, because you would think that sitting in 2023, we always talk about the stigma and the taboo and the shame. So I'm working on a men's mental health campaign at the moment where I have collected 30 men from around KZN and taking beautiful portrait shots of them and then getting them to talk about their mental health. Okay, and it's been going beautifully. We've shot 15 of the 30, but I woke up this morning and the person who I thought, would be the most excited to play and express, wrote me the most heartbreaking message saying that he battles with the most debilitating anxiety and he's actually spoken himself out of coming to the shoot today because he feels so trapped. And I'm on such a quest to hold space for men in society. The campaign is headed up by 2 women, and as a mother of 2 sons and a wife of a beautiful husband and a daughter of an incredible father, the time is now more than ever to keep pushing forward and creating a safe haven for conversations and for these men to be seen and heard.
That is invaluable, Jane, and it's just so difficult, for those individual men in that moment, in that space and time, they feel they've got to open up and become vulnerable, and they battle so much. But maybe with time, he will still come around. You can't force those things, obviously, no. But one's heart breaks. It is difficult to open up and to speak out about things like that, and it shouldn't be. Absolutely. But it is, especially for men.
Yeah. So we obviously, the platform for these conversations is to share, and to be vulnerable so that we can become access points for each other. So, when you look back on Spencer's life, I remember taking the book away with me on holiday, and it was just, again, it was so hard to read, but I actually couldn't put it down. So it was like this torn between, I want to read this, but I don't want to read this. I want to read this, I don't want to read this. And I think the chapter that really almost haunted me was the walk that you went on. I think it was the day before the suicide, and you described the smell of the flowers and the conversation around the dogs. As a mom looking back, were there things that you missed?
I think there must have been. Looking back, he was always very calm and very in control, but that was the way he faced it. He was a high-functioning depressive. And he had been on, obviously when we discovered in that final year and he had the breakdown, we took him in and he was seen by a psychologist, a psychiatrist. He was put on antidepressants of various sort, anti-anxiety meds, on a cocktail of them. And at the start of that year, 2019, he, at that stage, passed. He got his degree in mechanical engineering, and he wanted to come off his meds. So with the advice and care and supervision of his psychiatrist, he came off them. And he seemed to me to be doing okay. And I kept asking him, are you all right? Are you doing okay? And you say, did we notice signs? And then he started applying for jobs, which to me was very positive. And he went for interviews, which he found obviously very stressful as a person who'd been diagnosed with clinical depression and anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder. But he seemed to be coping okay. But then about 2 weeks before he left, one morning I found him in tears, sitting in front of his computer. And I said to him, Spence, you're going for interviews. At that stage, you'd even been accepted for a job. You're going to start a job in a couple of weeks. Are you sure you're all right? Should you not go back just for a brief time on those meds? And he said, Mom, I cannot go back on them. That's the trouble with medication. He felt he was a bit blurry, a bit fuzzy. He wasn't quite himself. And now I look back and think, on that day, should I have, I don't know what, he didn't want to go back. Could I have forced him into the car and driven him off to a place of psychiatric care? I couldn't have done that. My 6-foot-something strapping boy, but should I have pushed him harder? I held him while he wept, and there were many times that he wept. So that was obviously a sign he was not coping that well. But he assured me again, Mom, I can't go back to meds. I'm all right. I'm okay. So who knows? You know, those are sort of things that keep you awake at 2 in the morning. You can never put them down. And with high functioning depressives, it's particularly difficult. Yeah.
But I mean, I know, Glenn, as a mom, I work so hard and do a lot of facilitating in the space because as mothers, we're almost built with a default of guilt, right? We always nitpicking the journey and we should have and we could have and we didn't and we blah, 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 blah. So I assume in this situation, as you're saying at 2 o'clock in the morning, that brain of yours is just searching so desperately for evidence to get some clarity around something or anything.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, you talked about that last walk I did with him that evening. And you know how many times I've redone that walk. And in fact, I've written about the walk I do now compared to that for an anthology that's just come out called 320 Days of Sunshine Stories from KwaZulu-Natal. And on that walk, you know, he was calm as ever. He seemed in control, walking in his boxer shorts and an old T-shirt as always. And I said to him, you know, this was on a Saturday, and I said to him, yeah, Monday you start the new job, but, you know, don't let it stress you, although he didn't look stressed, but, you know, take it easy, my boy, because know that it's not just you that's on probation for a first job. They are on. If you don't enjoy the feeling there or whatever, you don't have to stay. You can just serve your probation. And he said, no, Mom, it's fine. And everything seemed okay. And I stressed to him that at any stage he could change his mind. He didn't have to go into an engineering job, which is what he was going to start. He could have carried on teaching master maths, which he'd done throughout varsity, which he loved doing, or just become a teacher, or be a teacher. Very challenging in its own way. And so there was no pressure on the boy to do this, because part of me thinks it was the pressure of starting that job on Monday, because he was starting then, and literally the Sunday morning he had left us forever. So it's very hard to get your head around that. One thought he had options, but he obviously felt he just couldn't. And, you know, I think with very bad depression, we still don't quite understand what depression means. We think, oh, we're a little bit blue, or we're down, put yourself together. Not that I would ever say that to anybody. But even as a mental health journalist who's written about these things, and I thought I knew the signs, you know, signs of withdrawal and changes in sleep and eating habits and irritability and various things, he masked most of those signs. You didn't see them. So it's just, it was just such a huge shock for us. It came out of left field, and I still can't believe that as a mother that it could do that. But your children can never cease to amaze you, and sometimes in such marvelous ways, and other times in ways like this, which kind of change something for a lot of people. Forever. You know, it's not just me, it's his friends, it's his family. I mean, he's got a wonderful young friend who's still in Cape Town who has had a tattoo. He sent me a picture quite recently on his arm of the scene where Frodo goes off to the Undying Lands on a raft, and that's the scene he's had on his arm. I mean, so I can see that, you know, for these boys, they can't believe it. He was just one of the guys. He was a regular chap. He used to play games with them online on Discord, you know, computer games, and meet up with them. They were here. They used to play Dungeons and Dragons on the lounge carpet upstairs. I mean, they used to go hiking in the Berg. They were the crew. And so each one of them carries kind of a hole within themselves through that. And in a way, it also, they say too, it's changed the way they look at a lot of life. In a way, it gives you a new understanding and a sympathy. And for a lot of guys, that can perhaps, in a way, only be a good thing. I mean, I can only hope, which is, again, why I speak and why I wrote the book, that in some way, from Spencer's loss, it can be a positive thing. I can't say a good thing in terms of if it opens up people to this sort of thing, and people like you are talking about this sort of thing. It to me can only make a difference. Thank you for doing.
Of course, Magdalene. So am I right in saying you're still in the house, and if I'm not mistaken, you're sitting in the study, which is very near to Spencer's bedroom?
Yeah, I'm sitting in the same place. We still live surrounded by his memories. Everywhere I look, I'm I still see him. And I think some people think you should maybe move on to a different place. I can't. I'm comfortable being with him and in this space and accommodating his memory within it. So I am still here. But Jane, I think maybe, I don't know if to talk for people who have been through this loss, and there are so many, that it's important to maybe look at little ways to help people maybe move forward, because, and it's not just a one-off thing. In terms of the piece I wrote also for a magazine quite recently, looks at the fact that in sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of women will lose a child at some stage by the age of 40. So it's a very, it's a common loss. I mean, in the old days, people just regularly lost children. That's why they used to have big families, I suppose, to counter it. But that given that this happens to a lot of people, one has to try and figure out a way to keep moving. And again, I've tried to write about, since then, these 4 years on, about ways that have helped us. I can only ever speak about what one is in a personal level. And
that was my next question, is what is helpful and what is not helpful? Because I think, again, in society, people get so paralyzed by the inadequacy of not maybe having the right words or knowing what to do, that it can either go towards super helpful or shame. Intention is so pure, but really not helpful. So can we chat around like a few things that are helpful and a few things that possibly aren't helpful?
Well, to me, not helpful was the people who just maybe avoid it altogether. And I understand why they do. They don't want to dwell on it. They don't want to upset you and move you to tears. But if you do meet people you haven't seen for a while, and say, how are you doing, is a difficult question, because what can one really say? So one is inclined to just brush up and say, fine, which actually means very little. But people who say to you, we went to the beach the other day, it just reminded me of when we were there with Spence, it was wonderful, and he used to do this, or they have a little fun memory or a happy memory. To share those with somebody who's lost a child is absolute gold. We love that. So please don't feel you've got to avoid it. We well up a bit. It doesn't matter. We're appreciating it, and it soaks in. So that sort of thing, the people who just faciliously avoid it, it's not so easy. But what we found, little things, we used to, and we still do, swim in the morning every day. I mean, cold water stimulates your vagus nerve, which apparently activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the antidote to your flight and flight stress response. So it helps relaxation. And just the meditative feeling of swimming and breathing at a certain rhythm, that to me helps. Or we walk. And seriously, if we had stopped doing that, we did that from the very next day after we lost him. That's kind of, you just don't think, you just go into the routine, but it keeps you moving. It kind of gets endorphins flowing, I think. That is helpful. And being in nature, that if you can walk outdoors, which we do, that is the way to go. And then it's little things. Obviously, it's things like unburdening, being able to have somebody you can speak to. SADC has got wonderful support groups, there's compassionate friends. But for me, it was turning to my Trinity, as I call them, my free best friends from school days, all far away, not in Durban, too out of the country. But just having somebody that you can pour out your feelings and thoughts to, and they hear you, and that is, in the end, say to you, oh, come on, move on, or snap out of it, or get bored. They kind of understand, and they share what they find in terms of something they're reading or some snippet or whatever. And just knowing that they're there, that has carried me through like nothing. And same with Spencer's godparents in Oxford. I mean, they have been so supportive and loving. And when, those sort of things you can't have too much of. That helps. So unburdening, moving, exercising. And then it's things like also finding some way of engaging and keeping the person's memory alive helps. So it's amazing what people do. I mean, so many people have reached out to me from reading Waterboy and found me online or whatever, and sharing things with them. We help each other. It's a mutual support system. And the way they've done it, all I could do was write, because it's what I do. So I did a book, but I've got friends who have do ceramics courses and celebrate their lost child that way. It's mostly children they've lost, but sometimes spouses. People who've planted fynbos in somebody's memory, who feed bees. Somebody like Ricky Rick's mom, Marvelous Louisa Zondo, who's now written her book too, who hacked to Everest Base Camp. It's somebody else, a man who rode a motorbike around South Africa. It's just, and one of them was a psychologist, a wonderful man who lost his child. Sounds terrible, but in a way, one feels that if as a health and mental health journalist, you can lose a child, to hear even a psychologist can, makes you think, okay, anybody can, it's not just me. And this man now also is facilitating gatherings in the town where he lives to give support to people who have lost somebody dear to them. So it's wonderful to see the ripple effects, what everybody does. Oh, and one mum has commemorated her daughter, Grace, most beautiful girl, by going with this group. They call themselves Last Wave Standing. No, One Last Wave. And they put their loved one's name on a surfboard. And somebody does a last surf out. And she put Grace's name on a surfboard that was going to be launched off the South African coast. And it's little things like that that help us in a way, I suppose, to symbolically commemorate the person that's gone, that they're not gone forever. There's something about them there. And I do believe that there is that. There is that energy, energy and atoms don't end. So in a way, that gives comfort. It really does.
Glenn, what do you do to remember Spence? I mean, obviously you're talking about walking and you're talking about swimming, which is for you and Chris, right? And obviously going out and writing the book and talking about it, of course, he is the engine that will bring the light and the support for community and those that are grieving. But is there anything that you do on a daily that is kind of for you and him?
Yeah, that's just literally when I do my walk. Even when I've swum, I still do a walk, because we've got a feral dog that my youngest son kind of adopted, a wonderful Shar-Pei Husky cross, and we walk. And when we walk, because the dog that I used to work with Spence, the main dog, he also has passed on. I'm inclined to talk to my son. I mean, what the hell? And to invite him to walk with me, and I chat with him, which sounds weird, I'm sure, but it's been a little time to just hold him close and think. I don't know if those atoms are able to understand or communicate in any way. I'm not into the whole esoteric side of things, but it brings me comfort anyway, and it's around me. Yeah, it really does.
Glenn, is there any anger? Because I know obviously there's the heartbrokenness and the sadness, but is there anger?
I'm surprised, but no. A lot of people have told me they do have anger. And I know also somebody very kindly gave me a little book to draw in. And so occasionally when I was moved to it, I would write or draw something in it or doodle something just to let my feelings out. And I look back now at the early ones particularly, and there's one that's just this, all I've written is why, and obviously I think it was pain, but there was possibly anger there too. Why? We thought we'd done everything. We thought and then how could you? And did you not realize what you were doing to us? And then you've got to stop. So I don't go there, because I've also since then spoken to a lot of people who have suffered with what my son suffered, who suffer from clinical depression, and to hear from them that I thought I understood depression, but that it can be so dark and so bleak that you can have no energy at all, that you can just getting out of bed to have a shower can be a big deal. And just the mental anguish of what serious depression really does to you. Trying to get through each day and put on a face and a front and look as though you're coping. It's enormous. It's enormous. And I don't think we realize how painful it is. I mean, there are people who've survived Auschwitz who have died by suicide. So there is something that depression is, that we've got to understand that they are dealing with something really serious. And I know that antidepressants, he felt they did not help him. He didn't like the person he became. It wasn't quite Spencer, but they help many, many people. And these days, thank goodness, there's other research. They're looking at things like psilocybin from magic mushrooms and goodness knows what else. And there's promising research coming out from Johns Hopkins and other institutions. So, and I've got friends who recommend it, microdosing. It's become the trendy thing now. They sent me some stuff, one of them did, and I tried it and felt absolutely nothing. I should probably have upped the dose or something, but I can't go. It's not me. Yeah. So I would just be me.
Yeah.
So I'll keep swimming, Jane.
Yeah, just swim, baby. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. Glenn, again, the heartache, and I mean, I battle to even try and imagine it for my own life, like losing a child like that. It just, I go into shutdown. Whew.
Yeah.
How do you navigate having another child and looking after him?
Well,
as far as
that's what makes it hard. I mean, as I said, he said to me the one day, Mom, I just want you to be happy. And that's when I realized that again, I'm freaking about it now. Somebody sent me that poem, The Orange. I remember sitting there, opening an orange. The poet writes along the lines of, and just the flavor and the juice was on, and the absolute joy in that moment with an orange. And I can't remember feeling like that certainly not since he's gone. I just don't think it's possible. So maybe you've got to recalibrate and get realistic, but you've got to try to be helpful and cheerful and upbeat, and move in that direction. And also, to me, I try to help a little bit in terms of spreading the word through SADAG and spreading their contact numbers, and the proceeds of Waterboy all go to my proceeds go to SADAG. So you feel as though you try and make a difference in the little ways that you can, and you try and get some feeling of satisfaction from it, but it's not the way the happiness should be that it used to be. But you do have to try. And his brother's amazing. He does his best. He gets out there and he plays in a band, and he's also been studying mechanical engineering the same as his brother. So somehow he's pushing through and just doing all the right things.
Do you ever think that, regardless of Spence being on the medication, having the support, having you asking him if he's okay, that he was always destined to go?
Well, sometimes I do, and I look around. I mean, just before he died when he was 25, and just before his 25th birthday, I did a big board with pictures of him throughout the years as a tiny, beautiful baby, and looking at him through various stages. And he always looked thoughtful. I mean, there would be happy pictures. Obviously, there were kids' parties, but there was a thoughtfulness and a quietness and a seriousness to him. Even his close friends said there was a serious side to him. He could be really just as crazy as the rest of them and do silly things, and he had good times, but there was a serious side to him that was only his. I suppose we all are like that to a degree. We don't open up all of what we're thinking and all of what we fear. And I know he always battles things like public speaking or that sort of things. He's a shy, quiet person, though he came over as very much in self-control. So I don't know, all these things you look at and just think, who was that boy? And sometimes I say to myself, did I ever really know him? Maybe that's we say for most of the people in our lives, we think we know them, but we're all presenting ourselves. And I think it's particularly hard for young people today when they're constantly curating their lives for Instagram, and for Facebook and everything else, and presenting who they should be with their best makeup and their best angle and putting their filters on. And, the third mental health state of the world report came out in March this year, and it found that it's never been worse. And of the 64 countries surveyed, South Africa was stone last, with the most people who were struggling with darkness and low feelings. And they also found that young people were particularly badly affected, and that young people in succeeding generations have got fewer real friends, i.e. friends they would meet in real life and not just online. And they link this rise in depression, especially among the youth, the one common denominator, obviously there are lots of factors, to the rise of the internet. And that these days people are spending 7 to 10 hours a day online. We live there and we curate our lives. We present these selves that we then feel we've got to live up to. And who are we really? And when we're in real life situations, how do we truly open up and relate who we are? Who are our authentic selves?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's madness, Glenn, because I mean, the concept is to connect us, right? But then, of course, the byproduct is loneliness, because that is not true connection, right? So I do also, you know, again, as a mother of 3 young kids, I do worry. I worry about this curated world that they're walking into that also has cancer culture and a heartbeat, you know? So, you know, God forbid you should stuff up anywhere in your life, because, you know, you could be cancelled. So it's not like back in the day. I mean, I'm always so grateful that there was no such thing as social media when I was growing up, because I probably would be unemployable because all the stumbling and falling and, you know, the stumbling stones to get to where I'm still evolving, but it wasn't under a microscope and it wasn't a search engine that could pick me up in Maritzburg in 1997. Whereas people today, it's everybody's business, you know what I mean? And that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot, and they're not afraid to voice their opinions on it and slap you down and, you know, bitch bite you and all the rest of it. It's very, very difficult, Jane. And you know, obviously, I was saying social media has got its advantages. I mean, I wouldn't be able to chat to my Trinity and share these things without WhatsApp, you know, and WhatsApp, that my messages formed the spine of my book. So, and there is a way of getting support and reaching out and using, like you're using your Instagram in such a positive way, but there's just this very, very dark underbelly of it and the other side of it, the flip side of it. And I think young people are particularly vulnerable. You know, if you've already established your friends and you've got good friends, and then you just have this as on the periphery, fine. But a lot of friendships now seem to be purely based on what happens online, you know. And even when the couples get together, you'll see them sitting at a restaurant chatting on their phones. I don't know, to other friends, maybe even to each other, because they've got more control. You can see what images and what words you use if you do it that way. Whereas in real life, you have less control. Maybe it's about that.
Yeah. Glenn, for someone listening now, may it be a parent that is concerned about their child, may it be a person that is worrying about whether or not they're going to get through the day, where do they go? What do they need to do?
Breathe deeply. When the first year anniversary of Spencer going, I had breathe tattooed on my wrist.
That,
and
yeah.
I just looked down and I breathed deeply. And in fact, I had an old Yoko Ono badge from an exhibition of hers I went to in Switzerland many years ago saying breathe. I used to wear that.
I remember when you came to visit me, you were wearing it. I remember that, yes. Yes.
And then I moved on to another badge I got on that day. She had a second one called Touch, and I wore that, and I've just lost it. I'm beside myself. But now I'm into like speaking out. So I don't know if you can see today, I'm wearing my William Kentridge megaphone badge, which is speak out. Speak out. So I hope the people listening, if they've got a problem, reach out, try and find somebody who can understand you, be sympathetic, and you can safely open up to. And if you don't have somebody like that in your real life, then you need to maybe contact somebody like SADAG, which is 0800 567 567, 0800 567 567. And you can also SMS them, and they will, you know, message you back and set you up. And they've got access to counselors who can chat to you. And if it's grief that's eating into you, I hear that compassionate friends are really good and open useful ears. And it's the idea of connecting with people who've been in your space. Not that you want to feast on it and immerse yourself in this all the time. That is not the idea. I mean, there's this Caroline Mace, not that I've ever been a Mace fan, I'm afraid to say. She's seen as a bit of a pseudoscientist, but a lot of people do love her stuff. But she had this term, woundology, of people who start to identify themselves only through their wounding, through the wound, and keep on pushing it every time they're with anybody. They bring up the same subject, and that's the only way they see themselves. And that's not the idea at all, obviously. But you also, by the same token, can't just put that aside and move on. You will always have this within you, and you can't pretend that it's gone away. You really can't. And I must say, I see that Caroline did not have any children, so I think that it's very hard to explain to somebody maybe who hasn't what that kind of loss feels like. Although I've got some marvelous friends who haven't had kids either who do understand. If you've loved anybody enough, and they're such a crucial part. With a child, you just feel an added responsibility. It was my job to give them life and keep them going. And how come I didn't fulfill that? Back to guilt again, you see.
Yeah.
So, people need to, they're going to feel all these things, and they will constantly feel them. And it will never just feel 100% okay, in spite of what other people want. And people will will you to get over it. They'll will you to move on. And you understand that. You wish you could. But there will always be, and you can, to a degree, as I say, the gaps between the paroxysms certainly get longer, and you learn to cope and move through it. But it will always be there. So just get support. That's the main thing. Somebody who hears you, find support.
I think that's really important. Glenn is saying, ask for help, but make sure you're asking from someone that's not going to tell you to get your head straight and move along. So seek somebody that's going to get where you're coming from. And then being on the other side of the coin, I'll give you an example. I had a very emotional male friend phone me a few nights ago, and he was beside himself. He was crying and crying and crying on the phone. And we eventually, after about 20 minutes of unpacking the sore and the heartache, got to a place where he was sobbing, and I just kept saying, I'm here, Because I think sometimes we also want to go fast into solution-based. I've got all the answers and we can propel ourselves through this discomfort. But also realizing that we have to sit with that discomfort, we have to sit with it. And just to know that someone, you can hear them breathing on the other line, is sometimes just enough.
It's exactly it. That's exactly what I got from the Trinity. Just to know that you are being heard, and they understand, and they are there for you. That is the biggest gift. You are doing something wonderful with that, Jane. If people only understood that that's what they want. And part of me now looks back and thinks, was I doing that enough for Spence? And I thought I was. You don't want to be a helicopter mom, especially with a young guy who's in his 25. You can't be a mummy. But you just want them to know. And I constantly said to him, I'm always here. Speak to me. I'm here for you. But that's what we need to do, and it won't always work. In my case, it didn't, because it depends on what they are dealing with. But for many people, just being really heard and felt and feeling supported, that's all that's really, really needed. It's the most important thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had your child. He was your purpose, and now he's gone, yet he's still your purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not taking away from your other son, but it's same, but one was wrapped in, I suppose, ease and joy, and this is maybe wrapped in discomfort and sadness, but he is still the purpose of getting up in the morning and going and speaking out.
He is. You've said that perfectly. He absolutely is. And that does help in a way to get you through those days. It really does.
So, Glynis, is there another book? I feel like you're writing in the background. Is there another book we can look out for?
No, at the moment it's the anthology, and as I say, pieces that I've written which carry through what's happened in the last 4 years. But I don't know whether I also look at the crowded shelves out there, books on healing from grief and blah blah blah, and we can only each share what worked for us, as I tried to do in my little way, and it's a personal kind of thing. But do I really think that we need to fell more trees to put my next lot of thoughts on how I'm doing it together? I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it. As I said,
maybe it's a compendium. Maybe it's, with all the mums that you're chatting with, it's collecting stories of how other people navigate. Because I think, again, like this platform, the more we share, the more we are able to become touch points for each other. And in this continually public life that we lead, as we've discussed, we live in silos. So we need to be sharing, we need to be talking, we need to be putting our hand up, we need to not have the answers, and that's okay. As long as we're talking.
I think you're absolutely right. And funny enough, now that you said, I'm thinking back, the last piece I wrote, which was Watermark, which dealing with grief 4 years on, it started off, I actually thought, is this another book? Because I was then starting to touch on other people's stories. But then I suddenly shortened it and made it into a magazine feature instead for Fair Lady, because I battled a bit, because I thought, I'm happy to put myself totally out there, but how comfortable will other people be with, when they're talking to me, they're sharing their inner selves, which, I'm very careful of sharing with nobody else, and this is their permission. So I would have to go back and speak to them, and maybe they would be keen to. The ones that I mentioned in the piece, Watermarked, said to me, how wonderful, I'm just, I'm part of that, and it's part of that group. Yeah. I just describe how we are, in a way, we're people who have had loss, and we're not united by what we have, we're united by what we've lost. And I describe that as being watermarked, which if you've lost a water boy, water girl, anybody else, I think that we are. And the psychologist who lost his child, he had that wonderful analogy where he talked about how he thinks that initially, when you're deep in this kind of grief, it's like you carry it out in a rip current, and you try frantically to swim, and you try desperately to swim to get out of it and make sense of it and get your head around it and deal with it. And then you realize that that's not going to help. And if you just relax in a way, kind of let go and let the current eventually, in its own time, it will release you and get you back to shore. I don't know what condition you will necessarily be in, but maybe that is the approach as well, to be gentle with ourselves and not push ourselves. But again, thank you for sharing that idea. Maybe with your encouragement, I needed to hear that. Maybe I will work on this now and make another book.
Beautiful. Book. Shine, my angel, shine. The world needs your voice. Glenn, how can people get hold of you for public speaking, for a copy of the book, for any kind of information? How can they get hold of you?
I'm on Facebook, and I promise to start being better. I'm terrible. I don't normally go on. And when something happens, it was like an anniversary of my boy going, which was on this month, in the 15th. Then I asked Ewan to post pictures and what my message onto my Facebook. But people, if they message me, I can get hold of them there. It's probably the easiest. Or they can email me. It's very easy. It's asmags, A-S for sugar, M-A-G-S, short for Associated Magazines, at mweb.coza, and it comes straight to me. But otherwise, certainly, and if they want to even, I don't want to burden your phone thing, but I'm happy to give my number to people who need somebody to talk to about this sort of thing. I'm always there.
Perfect. Well, I wore a special necklace for you this morning, or for your boy and for you. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, man. Oh,
little angel wings.
Yeah.
Especially for you, my darling.
And in your inimitable style. Thank you. That means so much. It really does. And just thank you for carrying on. And again, thank you for your 20 years of amazing support and loving, caring reporting on radio. And we're going to miss that, but you're carrying on with this sort of thing, and it is so important. And you're there for your kids, and that is the most important of all, to know that you are just being there fully in those moments. Those are the moments that you'll carry with you. And when you are old and on your bed one day, those are the ones you're going to be holding on to.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I'm really on a mission to tell human stories in different ways. I've had audio, as in the radio band, to carry that messaging. But for me, it's now creating beautiful content that evokes conversations that are really, really necessary. So my purpose is very clear. I'm forever indebted to East Coast Radio for giving me the platform, but for more than that, for allowing me to discover my purpose, because I think a lot of people live their whole entire lives and they don't know what that purpose is. I'm very clear on what my purpose is. So I'm feeling excited. In fact, my next conversation on Tuesday, I'll be chatting to a woman called Caroline Holly, and she is a part of an organization called Life Changer and the Pietermaritzburg Homeless Association. So they're a bunch of light workers. We're going up to Maritzburg on the 10th of October, and we're going to try and raise funds because, Glenn, there is one shelter in Maritzburg. There's one shelter in Maritzburg. It can house 20 women, no men, no children. And for me, it goes back to that conversation that we are all people and we all want to feel loved and we all want to feel seen and we all want to, you know what I mean? So I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to go into uncomfortable spaces and create touch points for us to just, walk each other home.
You know, that homelessness thing that she made particularly has struck home with me because at the end of Waterboy, reproduce where he'd been going on his computer searches for the last few months. My other son, my wonderful Ewan, managed to crack his computer and get in, and you could see he was searching for meaning and what he wanted to do and finding some alternative, and he was researching things like how stressful is engineering, how stressful is teaching, blah, 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 looking at different jobs. What are jobs like working on an organic farm? What about homelessness? He was researching vagrancy. It was almost as though he was considering the option of literally just dropping out of everything. And there was this child with this degree in engineering. So the idea of that, what is the meaning of life? And how do those people who are in that situation, how are they coping? And for you to be able to make a difference and to listen to those people and share those stories is wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Well, as always, I always light a candle for these kind of conversations because I think it's so important that it is reminded that the light in me sees the light in you. And Glenn, if I look at the state you were in 2 years ago, and we don't want to compare, but I'm going to compare where I see you today. On the back cover of your book, you write about this cavernous hole that grief is that you fall in and out of periodically. And I can imagine skirting that round rim of the darkness. But it's just so lovely to see some life in you and some buoyancy in you. And I'm just thankful for your time. And I love you very much. And don't stop SMSing me, ever.
Thank you, Jen. Really
love you, Glenn.
And thank you.
Bye. We'll chat soon. Yes. Bye-bye, my darling. Go well, my Glenn.